I think if you can meet people where they are, that is going to be the biggest step forward with implementation.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast. Or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by my Easy EdTech Club, a membership designed to help K-12 educators save time and simplify technology integration. When you join, you'll get instant access to dozens of months' worth of content from the past couple of years, plus new masterclasses, guides, and resources each month. It's all self-paced, so you can dive in whenever it works for your schedule. Head to easyedtechclub.com to learn more and sign up. That's easyedtechclub.com for all the details. This week's episode is titled, How to Roll Out a District-Wide AI Strategy with Katie Page. Katie is an instructional technology coordinator based in the suburbs of Chicago and the author of AI Blueprint for Schools, a practical guide for educators to integrate AI. In today's conversation, she shares how her district built an intentional, inclusive approach to AI integration, grounded in relationships, real use cases, and teacher trust. Whether you're just starting your AI journey or ready to take the next step, Katie offers some great strategies, some mindset shifts, and plenty of examples that I know will help you out. Let's jump into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Katie. I am so excited to chat with you about all things AI today. But before we get into that, can you share a bit with listeners? What is your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Monica. I'm very excited to chat about AI. I feel like that's all I'm doing lately. I'm sure you as well. So my name is Katie Page, and I'm an instructional technology coordinator for my district. And last year was actually my first year, full-time year out of the classroom. So I was an instructional coach and sharing my teaching duties with doing some instructional coaching. I was in every single technology committee that has existed in the last 15 or 20 years. I was a physics teacher for all of that time. And astronomy, things like that. But now I have a full-time job, which is great that my district is supporting that, just doing instructional technology.
So yeah, just the ability to allocate your time kind of to one big mission, right? Although I'm sure there's lots of components. And, today we're talking about some of the themes and kind of general advice from your book, AI Blueprint for Schools. And so I'm curious, what first sparked your interest in exploring AI in education, particularly at that district level?
Yeah. So really, I think my interest in technology, I've always been an early adopter. I'm sure many of your listeners and you have seen those bell curves, of just generally of humans, but in the teaching world, the early adopters, the innovators, and then, the skeptics are on the other end. I've always been like a jump first, look later kind of person. And so what I was noticing in my instructional coaching role was that instructional technology in our district in particular, and I'm in a very large public high school district in the suburbs of Chicago. There's 7 school buildings. We're at about 2,000 students each building. And I was noticing that the instructional coaches in each building, there really wasn't consistency at this particular point. Like back in the day when we first implemented and every student had one-to-one iPads, there was a person in each building that was sort of focusing on that, like, teaching staff how to use iPads, teaching staff how to teach students how to use iPads, what we could use them for. But very quickly, as time moved on, I feel like that really got stirred so far into the soup that there wasn't one particular role in the district that was focusing on ed tech. Some instructional coaches did, like me, because I love it, so I would coach with staff around instructional technology, but in other buildings that really wasn't happening. So last year or the year prior in the spring, I had kind of brought this conversation up to district leaders. And I said, listen, I think with AI on the horizon here, really it was already here, but people weren't like really clued in at that particular point so much. I said, really, we should have a person at the district doing this, and I would like to do it. And then they said yes. And for those of you that work in public education, if your jaw is dropping, mine did too. I couldn't believe they said yes. And so then just like that, I wasn't in the classroom. And I've been doing this pretty much since that day, really before that school year even ended and all through that summer. And so, yeah, I was using it a little bit in my classroom with my space science students, and I could see that this was going to be different than when kids started just Googling something,
Oh, yeah. And just like you alluded to, like the idea that a district would make that commitment, right, or signal, right, that this is a priority, doesn't happen all the time, especially right in our ed tech world. And so it speaks so much to just what the proliferation of this technology, both inside and outside of education, has looked like. So when you started thinking about, this work, what kind of vision did you develop for what AI would look like in schools and the district level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't really start out so much with a vision other than the vision that I have been carrying really since like 2014. In 2014, I did a presentation at ISTE way back in the day about the SAMR model, because again, I'm one of those early adopters. And I was like, hey, everyone, look at what we can be doing with iPad. And so my vision has always been to be having my students doing the creating and innovating. And so I kind of took that piece with me into this role, really, because so many staff still haven't kind of picked up that message. I feel like a lot of teachers, even in my own district and just kind of, I'm sure across the globe, never really kind of jumped onto the whole last wave of technology or didn't really use it to its fullest. So I brought that with me into this role, just kind of adding on AI as that next piece, maybe starting out as using it with a tool, but really now is moving so quickly, using it as like a partner and, more of like an agent with us. So my philosophy, my vision has just changed across the entire school year as it started to roll out. And the more and more I worked with staff, seeing their needs and kind of where people were at. So.
Yeah. And I would imagine getting that real-time feedback from your colleagues, from just the quickly developing nature, right, of some of this technology and the use cases, right? There's a lot that can evolve, right, over a short period of time. And so I know when I've done some work with schools and districts around AI implementation, oftentimes we, lean back into what a district's vision is, right, what their mission is, what's kind of always been a core values for them, as opposed to saying like, we need a completely separate AI thing. Like the guidelines will come, right? But a lot of this is driven like what our values are. So I'm curious from, your personal philosophy or your district's kind of core values, were there any guiding principles that really helped shape your AI rollout strategy?
Yeah, so we have a new superintendent actually, and we have a brand new strategic plan and a brand new portrait of a graduate. And the great news is that a big portion of the student-facing parts of all of those new plans and ideas, and some of it's not new, it's just been kind of updated, is about the creativity and the innovative, piece. So that's great. And I think really all of it starts with building relationships with kids, building relationships with staff, and helping people and students especially find their best parts, their passions, their thoughts about what they want to do, what they want to build, what they want to create, and having staff tap into that.
Yeah. And just that, that gets to kind of some of the questions I have for you about challenges, right? And building buy-in, when we're listening to all those voices in our community, I'm sure you hear, some of the similar things that I do. It's been really interesting to see it evolve. Also, where like a lot of my early conversations with educators went straight, understandably, right, to the cheating piece, right? Like essays are done, back to blue books, like completely get that sentiment. Absolutely. And then I've watched it kind of evolve over the past year or so, where the questions have changed, like around environmental impact or around IP, like intellectual property, kind of we make the comparison sometimes back to distance learning, where before everyone was like on their devices, they were asking very different questions about EdTech implementation, and their just vocabulary increased. They were asking really, smarter questions, if you will, because they're forced to interact with all of this. And I've kind of seen a similar parallel with the AI of it all. So, what are some of the biggest challenges you face during the implementation of your, plan in your schools and district? And how did you build buy-in with these stakeholders that I'm sure came to the conversation with a variety of perspectives?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question. If we could solve buy-in from staff, we would be sitting on a beach somewhere, I'm sure, with a nice floofy cocktail. But yeah, some of the ways that I have found buy-in is for sure relationships. Now, luckily for me, I've been in the district for a very long time, decades. I know people in all of the buildings at this point. So it's great. So that's nice because people know me. I know people. But so I would say that is the first part is buy-in. The second part is, of course, building relationships. You have to have trust with your staff. If you're having conversations around technology, people are in so many different places, and you need to listen to either the staff member or the group of people that you're with and hear what they're actually saying and internalize it, and not just listen to respond, but listen to understand what they're saying. And I think if you can meet people where they are, that is going to be the biggest step forward with implementation. But some of like the nuts and bolts, getting in front of staff is hard. We have a great union, which I appreciate, and we have a lot of autonomy of staff, and we don't have like tons of required PD. We have required PD, of course, but there's not like tons and tons. And so most of what I do is optional. And so getting in front of staff is tough. So I try to make sure that I go to where staff are. Either I'm making recordings, I have morning Zoom sessions that are optional, but the biggest piece I think that I found is actually getting into the buildings in front of staff. So I will go to division meetings. I will do just like pop-up, PD. I'll go to a building in the morning and I'll just say, hey, I'm here. And I want to just show you some tips and tricks with your MacBook and your iPad, just something simple. Yeah. Are you annoyed that this particular menu keeps popping up and you don't know why it's doing that? Come on down and let me help you. And then while they're in front of me, I'll say, by the way, have you turned on Apple Intelligence? So just using those little inroads, keeping it easy, meeting people where they are. And then just coming at it from all angles. I've got a website, I put recordings there, how-tos, I've got a newsletter, just boom, 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 every angle, trying to just make things accessible for staff when they're ready to receive and maybe learn a little something new.
Yeah. And that's such a huge part of, right, just ed tech and probably all, right, topics of professional development is, what are your pain points? Like you said, what's bugging you about the menu that keeps popping up?
Yep.
And then kind of sneaking in, or if you will, and kind of adding on that additional layer when someone's ready and receptive to it. And so, a lot of times with the ed tech of it all, we focus a lot on the what, like what this tool is, right? What this tool does, on to the next one. Here's another one. But as we shift kind of to the when and the why, right? How are you helping educators understand not just what's out there, right? And how to press all the buttons, but when and why it makes sense for teaching and learning?
Yeah. So I talk about that a lot with staff, like why would they bother? And I think the easiest way for me to show them is to show them what all their staff are doing. So if we're talking about teachers in particular, because I'm lucky enough to have been in the district for so long and I know so many people, I just reach out to staff that I know are doing cool things, and I highlight that in my newsletter, and I just say, hey, like in the SPED department over in this other building, did you know that they are taking, when they're in a classroom, especially if they're not super familiar with the content, like let's say they get put as a co-teacher into a history class, and they want to make that material accessible for their students that they're helping. This is how they did that. They took that assignment, they loaded it into Gemini, they asked it to lower the reading level. And then also, guess what? They had a new student from another country and they translated it into another language. And all of this took a minute for them to do. And just showing them those easy first step use cases, I think, that other staff are. So it's not just coming from me.
Right. Yeah.
Saying, listen, your colleague down the hall is using this. Yeah.
I love those kind of examples because I think just like you said, they hit differently, right? They resonate in a different way. They're not as abstract, right? Even if that person doesn't know, right, the science teacher on the other side of a very large district, right? They have some level of community with that person, and it reinforces, a big idea. And so I love that, especially, you having a newsletter where you're able to, right, give those shout outs, share those examples. And so, one question that comes up a lot when talking with schools who are making decisions on what to use, what not to use, how to use something, is around just the ethics, student privacy, access. So, I'm curious, how are you addressing some of these concerns about AI ethics, student privacy, equitable access as part of your district-wide rollout and conversations on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, we have definitely updated as far as on a policy side. I helped update policy with the technology department, and that is top of mind with the student data and privacy. Luckily, our district was already on top of student data and privacy, and really equitable access. We've tackled that as well. So, I mean, I can think about this in many different ways. So policy, we didn't have to change very much because we already had really good policy, or not only around, let's say, like cheating, right? Because that's the thing that comes up all the time, but also about student privacy. And so with AI, I think really staff just needed to be reminded, you should not be putting a data sheet full of student information, and attaching that to ChatGPT. We had a lot of discussions around, once we implemented Gemini across our Google Workspace, we had a lot of talks about student privacy and data because Google already has access, right? We use Google Drive to store all of our things. And we had very complex discussions with staff about, it's a little bit complex. They already have access. So if you let Gemini take a look at your Google Drive, like that's okay. It's already under our educator window. We've signed the privacy. We've got the guardrails, and it's okay. But if you're going to go outside to someone else that we don't have these agreements signed with, no student, personally identifiable information, I've had to do some training around what is SOPA, what is FERPA, what are these things and why does it matter? And staff have been really responsive and listening. And from where I sit, it seems like they've gotten the message around that. And then as far as equitable access, we're one-to-one district. So every student has an iPad. We also offer Wi-Fi to communities that maybe don't have Wi-Fi access. We also have Wi-Fi on all our buses. And so we're coming at equitable access from a lot of different avenues. And we've actually added both Gemini and ChatGPT student apps to we have like an internal app store in our district. And so I feel like, we've got some pretty equitable access going out. And then this year, I'm going to be also reaching out to parents in the community as well.
And I think that's, an area too where, families are curious, they hear things, and even just giving them some quick ways to make the most, right, of this technology that is also consumer facing, right? Not just in classroom, particularly the chatbots, like you mentioned, is a great component for someone to consider as they're kind of looking at this whole rollout that they might be taking on. So, Katie, you've written a book called AI Blueprint for Schools, a practical guide for educators to integrate AI. What inspired you to write it? Who is it for?
Yeah. So like I had said before, I'm new to this role really in this last year. And the more I read, and man, is it just rapid fire, the news about AI in education, at least in the circles that I'm living in my news feed and that sort of thing. The more that I read, the more that I'm seeing that districts are not as lucky as me in my district that have a person, a singular person who is tasked with staying on top of all of this. And I thought, well, geez, I could easily just write about what I just did in the last year. I had a lot of success in a lot of places, and then also talk about maybe the places that, didn't really work so great, and then what our future plan is, and why not just write it all down?
Yeah.
And, other educators, other districts could take it, and it's literally a blueprint. But fun fact, there are a zillion AI books apparently on Amazon with the word blueprint. So that was a rookie mistake, but but really that's what it is. It's not a book about necessarily how to use AI. I mean, I of course mentioned that across the book, but it's about how someone in my role, or how leaders or ed tech leaders or admin, how you might go about like the different components of reaching staff and building capacity at the building level and that sort of thing. So it's a blueprint in that way, like how to integrate AI.
And we'll make sure to link out to it in the show notes so people can find yours.
Oh, great.
They are going out to search for great resources.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, on Amazon of books from past podcast guests. So yours will be there for when anyone
fantastic.
is listening to this too. But for anyone who's just kind of on the go, on the move as they're listening in today and wants to make that mental bookmark of how to stay connected, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work?
Yeah, I mean, I would say LinkedIn would probably be the easiest, or you could visit my website at katiepage.ai, KATIEPAGE.ai. Yeah, so I've got some courses online too. Some are free, some are paid, and a link to my book is on the website as well. But this has been really fun. I love talking about all of this.
Yeah, it's a favorite topic and very timely. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Monica.
It was lots of fun chatting with Katie today, and we're going to finish up like we always do with a few ways to make this EdTech easy. Relationships and trust are essential for AI adoption across schools. Real-life use cases build staff buy-in more effectively than just tool demos. Ethical AI use requires clear reminders, not just new rules. Small, practical tips can open the door to deeper AI conversations. Remember, you can find the show notes all the resources we chatted about today, including how to connect with Katie Page and her book, by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com. That's where you'll find today's episode and all the episodes for the Easy EdTech Podcast. You can scroll back through hundreds of them. And of course, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or another favorite, you'll see the link to the show notes page and some quick links for more info right in the description or the little paragraph that goes along with today's episode in your podcast player. This episode is sponsored by my Easy EdTech Club, a membership designed to help K-12 educators save time and simplify technology integration. When you join, you'll get instant access to dozens of months worth of content from the past couple of years, plus new masterclasses, guides, and resources each month. It's all self-paced, so you can dive in whenever it works for your schedule. Head to easyedtechclub.com to learn more and sign up. That's easyedtechclub.com for all the details. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.